I'm going to cover advanced topics in kombucha making today. And if you do not know what kombucha is or don't know the history of it or why you should drink it, I suggest you go to my video for beginners. Before you implement anything I'm going to talk about today, you really need to be an expert in making kombucha. And I say do not try this at home. It's kind of a joke term, but I really mean that. What I'm doing here is a little bit complicated and you really need to know what you're doing with kombucha. Here's a good rule of thumb. If you make your kombucha every week or two and you don't have to look at a recipe and you just do it out of your head and you know it so well that you can do it like that, then I would consider you an expert. If you still have to consult any sort of written prompts or a cookbook or my video or anything like that to get you through making your batch each time, then you are not yet ready to try what I'm about to go through, okay? So start slow, and even if you need to make big batches, just add bowls. In my How to Make Kombucha Part 1 and 2, I have how to make 1 3/4 bowl of kombucha. And as you need more, just add bowls, okay? And when you get to a certain point, you're going to realize, oh, I need advanced topics, and that's when you come to this video. But do not come to this point until you really, really know what you're doing. I can't reiterate that enough because this is a lot of stuff that I'm doing here. It's a lot of time, a lot of tea, a lot of sugar, and you do not want to waste your time doing this and get discouraged. Okay, so let me explain to you my approach for making large batches of kombucha. Basically what I do is I make a tea and sugar concentrate, and then I dilute it with water after I split it up between my containers. The containers I use are these 10-quart glass jars. Now what I do is when I make my kombucha concentrate and then dilute it with water, I only fill it up to about 7 quarts. And you may ask, well, why don't you go all the way? If it's a 10-quart jar, why don't you use 10 quarts? And the reason for that is kombucha, the depth of your brewing liquid should not be significantly deeper than it is wide for the container. So you can see how wide this container is. I'm guessing 7 inches, maybe 8 inches. You shouldn't go much deeper than that for your liquid. So if you went all the way to the top here, likely chances are the brew wouldn't take and it would fail. So I only go to about the 7-quart mark on each of these jars. So between each of these jars, I'm making basically a 21-quart batch, and I do this about every 2 weeks in our house. Okay, so now that we've gone over the jars and the containers, we can talk about the boiling container. I have a 16-quart stainless steel stock pot here, and I'm boiling 15 quarts of water in it right now, and the water is boiling and it's ready to go. So after the water's boiling, I'm going to take my sugar and that we talked about in the earlier video, and you know how to do this. I'm basically, even though there's only 15 quarts of water in here, I'm going to put enough sugar in there for 21 quarts of kombucha to brew. Does that make sense? And then after the water boils with the sugar water for 5 minutes, as you know, we remove it from the heat, and then we add tea, and I'm going to add enough tea to brew 21 quarts of kombucha. But this is only a 15-quart stock pot. So you see what I'm saying when I say that I'm creating a sugar tea water concentrate. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the first step. I've got 15 quarts of water boiling here. I've got 7 cups of sugar here. And if you notice, let's do the math here real quick with me to make sure I'm right. If there's 21 quarts, you need 1 cup of sugar for every 3 quarts. So 21 divided by 3 is 7. So I need 7 cups of sugar. That's how I came up with that. And of course, what I'm doing here, you can apply to any amount of kombucha you want. If you want to make more, if you want to make half as much, all you need to do is take what I'm doing here and apply it to your situation and do the math, and it'll come out right. And this is basically how I came up with it, is just by sitting down with a pencil and paper and figuring out the math. Okay, so we're going to pour the sugar in. You're going to need a super long wooden utensil because a 16-quart stock pot is quite deep. You don't want to burn yourself, so get yourself a nice long wooden spoon. Then you're going to stir it up and boil it for another 5 minutes. The water has boiled with the correct amount of sugar in it. We're now going to remove the stock pot from the heat. And we're going to add the tea. Now let me talk to you just a minute about tea. When you're making large amounts of kombucha, you may want to consider going to bulk tea from tea bags. It's a lot more cost effective, and especially since you are buying organic tea, which I recommended before if you remember, because regular tea is high in fluoride. I do recommend organic tea. Today I'm going to use a mix of black tea bags and bulk green tea because that's what I have on hand today. I'm actually out of bulk black tea, and if you're out of one or the other, you can mix. And let me talk a little bit about the amounts. A regular tea bag has 1 teaspoon of tea in it. So you can sit down and figure out how much bulk tea you need as an equivalent. For example, since we are going to be brewing 21 quarts of kombucha, our basic recipe is 3 quarts, and a basic 3-quart recipe requires 4 tea bags, if you remember. 3 goes into 21 7 times. 7 times 4 would be 28. So we need 28 tea bags for this entire batch. And the entire batch is in here. It's going to be a tea sugar water concentrate, as I talked about before. So divide 28 tea bags, which is what we need for this entire batch, by 2, because we're going to do half green tea, half black tea. I've got 14 organic black tea bags here. Put those in. And over here, I have 4.5 tablespoons of bulk organic green tea. And you say, well, why do you have 4.5 tablespoons? Because a tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. So 4.5 times 3 equates approximately to 14 teaspoons of organic black tea, which is what I would need if I was using organic green tea bags. If none of that, what I just said, makes sense to you, stick with tea bags. But I wanted to just run over that quickly because when you do go to large batches, using bulk tea is much more cost effective and for making your large batches of kombucha. So here's my green tea equivalent, 14 black tea bags. The equivalent is 4.5 tablespoons of green tea. Dump that in. All right. And now we're going to let that steep for 10 minutes. To now strain the tea bags and the bulk tea out of our tea sugar water concentrate and get them into the brewing containers. So I'm going to do that real quick. I'm going to show you how to do that. I have a strainer here, which I put over the lid of the jar. And then I get a really giant soup mug. And be very careful, you can really hurt yourself here. Okay, we've strained it all out. You can see the amounts here are uneven. So then you just need to even them up. Let's see, are they about close? It's about right. Doesn't have to be perfect. Close enough. And then we've got the sugar tea water. We've got about 5 quarts of sugar tea water concentrate in each of these jars. Then, you remember our goal is to do a 21 quart batch, which is 7 quarts per jar. So now we have to add 2 quarts of filtered cold water per jar, and that will bring us to 7 quarts per jar. So here's 2 quarts of filtered cold water in this one. 2 quarts in this one. And 2 quarts in this one. And take your wooden utensil and stir it. And what you have is 7 quarts per jar. Now we are going to take another break, and this is going to take about 2 to 3 hours to get to body temperature before we can go to the next step. The sugar tea water has now cooled sufficiently to move on to the final step, and that is to put the starter and the culture in there and move them to a location where they can brew for 7 days. Incidentally, when you're brewing larger batches, interestingly, it doesn't take any longer for them to brew. These will still take about 8 days. We're here in the spring in March, probably 8 to 9 days to brew. I'm guessing, And the reason I don't go any bigger is these jars are pretty heavy to move, and that's why I don't go with any larger containers to brew, because then you can't move them around, and you need to really be able to do that. You see in some places where they have 5-gallon brewing tanks with a spigot at the bottom. Those really don't work because those spigots are made of plastic, and you would have the finished kombucha brewing in a container where there's plastic exposed, and as I talked about in my Kombucha for Beginners videos, you can't have plastic involved at all with kombucha, either when it's brewing or when it's finished brewing. It always has to be clear glass. So just make sure you're safe, and kombucha is a wonderful cleansing drink. Don't turn it into just another toxin in your environment by doing it wrong. So here we go. We're going to put in the starter, and we've got 7 quarts per jar here, which means I'm going to put in close to 2 cups of starter. And the reason I'm putting in that much starter is, again, when you start doing the concentrate approach like I did, diluting with water, once you put the concentrate in the brewing containers, you do increase your chances of mold. And that's why this is an advanced topic, because people who know when you do things to increase your chances of mold, you need to increase your starter accordingly. And that's what I'm doing here by using almost 2 cups of starter per jar. So we're going to pour the starter in first. It's a little less than 2 cups, but almost. And then, of course, you're going to mix with a wooden utensil. And then you're going to add your culture to each jar. And then you are going to cover and seal. It's not really a seal, just secure your cotton cloth with the rubber band. And then you're going to make sure that kids and pets are out of the way, and you're going to move these to a safe location where they can brew uninterrupted for about 8 days. This is Sarah, the Healthy Home Economist of 𝗿𝗵𝗆𝗆𝗏𝗍𝒻𝒀𝒐𝒻. I hope you've enjoyed this video on the Kombucha Advanced Topics. Have a great day.